What's going on, everybody? It's TripleCrown24 back today with a new episode of the Card Dealings Podcast. It's a podcast about selling sports cards, and today it's about a word that I have a very love-hate relationship with. It's a word that, to me, carries a negative connotation. And that's perhaps because in most contexts where it's used, I feel that it is used in inappropriate, incorrect, or just flat-out deceptive ways. That word, of course, is comps. And there's nothing wrong with comps. We use them pretty much every day in the sports card world. I use them myself, so I'm not going to pretend that I'm above that. I'm not going to pretend that I'm not someone who likes to look at data myself. What I am saying, though, is that we might have gotten a little carried away with this term, and I believe that the word and the practice of using comps has become a gross misuse of what they are designed for. I know some people are probably already rolling their eyes saying this is the crusty dude at the card show who gets mad if you check his prices and he's always way too high on stuff. Actually, no. I have no qualms about you checking my prices. In fact, I'll look things up for you. I'll show you what I'm seeing. I'll show you the data that I looked at and make my argument of why I think this card should be valued at this price and why I think you should own it for that price as well. I'm all for it. What I'm not for, though, is when the term is used to be deceptive, to try to take advantage of someone. And that's what I've seen more and more of, especially around the show scene, dealing with people, is just some of the practices that are used when they're bringing up comps. And when they use that word, what comes after it, I'm not a huge fan of. So I want to talk today, and this can be used in two different ways. Number one, it can alert you to some of the practices out there that may lead you to getting the short end of the stick, if you will, whether you're misinformed or you're lied to. It could be one or both. And then also, if you're doing these things, I'd encourage you to stop. Obviously, I have no control over you stopping, and if you're going to do what you do, continue to do so. But I'm just putting this out there for whoever wants to listen. As always, this is just my opinion. You don't have to agree with it, but it doesn't mean I'm wrong. It's just my opinion. I feel the need to put this disclaimer out there just because people think that because I have a YouTube channel, that whatever I say has to be taken as fact, when no, really a lot of what I just say on here is opinion. And that's really what comps are. A lot of times they are just opinion because all they are data points. And let me tell you where they started at, because it's not anything that's new to sports cards. We've used comps for decades. Back before COVID, we just called it eBay completed sales. Now we have the fancy term for it that is derived from a different industry. We'll get into that in just a second. But it goes even back beyond the eBay days. We have the Beckett book, where we have a Beckett market value for cards. And a lot has changed since then. In the Beckett days, we were just talking about base sets. There were maybe 6 sets at most released a year. There were no parallels. It was just cards that had a very set in stone type of price guide to them. There was a Beckett high and a Beckett low. It would show you the change in them. Whereas now, things are vastly different. Every card has 500 different parallels. There's dozens and dozens of sets released across multiple different sports. They make trading cards for non-sports intellectual properties. There's a lot of different types of cards out there now that if you wanted to publish a Beckett every month with every single card, it would probably be stacked to your ceiling with the number of pages that would have to be inside that book. But in the year of 2026, we have the word comps, and we have a bunch of different tools out there, some that pull in an aggregate of data spanning decades from eBay and other online platforms. And we use this term comps as a derivative from a term that is mostly used in real estate. Comps in real estate is something that is helpful for the appraisal of a house, determining what is the fair market value for a house. And of course, no two houses are the same. I mean, there's a joke now that houses are kind of cookie cutter, right? They build them all the same. There's all these DIY guys, the house flippers that do things the same way. But every house is unique. The story of every house is unique when it was built, where it's at. All of these factors can play into what is the house valued at. And truthfully, there is no set price for a house. It is a subjective value. But we can make a guess of what is a accurate price based on a variety of things. Mostly, what have similar houses sold for in the area? And we'll take into consideration what are the size of those houses. What is the total square footage? How many bedrooms, how many bathrooms are in these houses? We'll take a look at the neighborhood itself. Is it in a high-income area, a low-income area? What is the crime rate in that area? What is the school district? That can play a huge factor as well. If it's in a really premier school district, you might be seeing a bump up in the house. Are there any major outlying issues? Perhaps the house belonged to a hoarder and it has some major structural issues to it. That could play a factor in. We can't necessarily look at what the house is sold for previously. For example, right now, I have a friend who is looking to sell a house that they have owned since 2011. I can tell you right now that the house is not worth what they paid for it in 2011. I believe it is worth quite a bit more than that. Now we can maybe try to use a formula to predict, well, here's another house in the area that sold back in 2010 that sold last year in 2025. We'll see if maybe we can use that multiplier to factor in, but it's not just a one-for-one formulaic equation. It's subjective, right? And we can argue till we're blue in the face about the value of these houses. And I say all that, and probably none of that sounds ridiculous, but yet when it comes to sports cards, when we try to apply the same practice to it, that's when people start huffing and puffing, because not every single sports card is unique. Technically, they are, because condition ranges on every single card. There might be 25 copies of any given card out there, and the condition will not be exactly the same on any two given ones. Even if they're both graded by PSA, they're both PSA 10s, for example, not all PSA 10s are created equal. I'm sure there's minor differences between those two cards, but they're relatively the same. There's very minute differences that we would just kind of call it a wash, if you will. There are data points out there to try to predict the value, and for cards, those data points can be very plentiful. There are cards that sell multiple times a day, every day. A lot of times your case hits. Those are the type of cards that we're talking about. Or perhaps your base cards, your silver prisms, if you will. That's the example that's always used. And then there are cards that sell once a month. There are cards that sell maybe once a year. Then there's cards that maybe have only sold a number of times this decade that you can count on one hand. It just depends. But the rules for them seem to always be the same. We seem to use comps in the same way. And that's where I kind of take issue with, because should you use comps in the same way that you try to use it for a base silver prism for a card that's numbered to 5? In my opinion, no. It's not the same. And you'll hear people out there. There's a guy on X who I used to have a lot of respect for. Won't get into it now. But he had made a post, I think this was a couple years ago now, asking someone like, well, what's wrong with saying the last one did? Or what's wrong with pointing that out? And it's because when you say that, in my experience, 9 times out of 10, regardless of the context, it is being used in a deceptive manner. In the last sale or any one sale of a card does not mean that is the market value of the card. It does not, because there are other factors that come into it. And you'll always hear the guys who say this be like, oh, well, yeah, of course, for base silver prisms, this is, it makes more sense then. But if it's something rare, then yeah, the comps don't always matter. And a lot of these are the same guys that will come up to a show, or a table at a show rather, and they will see a card number to 25 that hasn't sold in 40 years, and they will try to use that data point from 40 years ago, if it fits their narrative, of course. If the card is down from then that data, oh, well, it's down from then. But if it's up from then, well, then that's the price of the card. Believe it or not, I have a friend who works in a shop who told me, this was about a year ago, that there was a guy looking to match the last sale of a card, and the last sale of this card happened in 2019. And this happened last year in 2025. 6 years since the card is last sold. Well, this is what it last did. Nothing's changed in the card market since 6 years ago. I don't know about you, but a lot's changed in my life over the last 6 years. Absolutely insane. But that is what I mean. So when people say, oh, well, you know, when you look at the silver prisms and stuff, it's okay, but the other stuff, it's not. That's not true. It's not true. That's not what these guys are doing. They're doing it on any card as long as it fits their narrative. That's what I have found, and it's something I've talked about time and time again on this channel, whether it be on the podcast or in my show vlogs. It's whatever fits the narrative. And here are some of the ways that I think that the comps are used in a deceptive practice. The first one, I just gave you an example, the outdated references on a card. If something has not sold in 6 years, or even I would say a year, that is pretty much outdated because a lot changes in the market. Even if nothing has happened with that particular player, like for example, let's say Jerry Rice. There's nothing that has really happened to Jerry Rice in the last year that would be of note that would affect his hobby one way or another. But the overall market has changed. I have seen a big uptick in a lot of 90s stuff, a lot of early 2000s stuff, some of the high grade rookies. I'm talking about your 9s and 10s of key Hall of Famers across multiple sports. Those have also gone up here over the last 12 months or so. So is it fair to say that, you know, Jerry Rice himself hasn't done anything to change his market? Yes, but also the market itself has done stuff to change Jerry Rice's card value, if that makes sense. So outdated references, and again, it can even be more short term. For example, I had an Ohtani card that you saw in the vlog earlier this week where the last sale in a PSA 9 was in January, which is only a little under 2 months from the date of the show I was selling it at. But the Ohtani market has been so hot and has moved up so quickly that data really isn't an accurate depiction of what the price is anymore. We can use that data as a prediction for what it is worth now, but it's not necessarily a one-for-one congruency where, okay, it was worth this then, it's still worth this now. That's just not how it works. So it's not necessarily always, it has to be a set amount of time. Someone can have a huge game and then can blow it. Look at Drake May. If you're looking at sales of his, you really have to look at from the start of January to the lead up to the Super Bowl as this separate window from before then and after then, because that market is a huge roller coaster. So context matters in these things. You have to know what was going on in the market at the time if you want to use those data points to get a more accurate depiction of what the value of the card is. The second one is cherry picking, and we kind of talked about this as well, and specifically the term the last one did. Usually when someone says that to me, I am immediately on guard. And my next question to them will always be, what about the one before that? That's the first question I ask. And it's kind of funny. Last month at Grove City, I had a lot of people who wanted to all of a sudden use the average of the last two or the last three, maybe the last four. I heard all of these different things, and you might say, well, what's wrong with that? Well, these are the same people that have in the past hit me with the last one did. Now all of a sudden they want to average it out. Well, why is that? Is it because they think that that's a more accurate representation of the data? No, of course not. It's because the last sale is higher than the other ones, so they want to try to use whatever the most recent low sale they can to bring that average back down so that they can get it for cheaper. Again, it's whatever fits the narrative. But oftentimes, if there's a low sale that pops up, people want to just cling on to that, especially if it's the most recent one. It doesn't matter if there's a auction that ended 20 minutes before that did a lot more. In those 20 minutes, the market value of the card tanked 20% because that one auction went off despite the 5 that had gone off within the last 24 hours before it. Nope, here's this low one. This is what it's worth now. That to me is just wrong. That's not an accurate depiction of what the market of the card is, unless all of a sudden a bunch of these cards start appearing available for those prices. And that's something we'll touch on here in a little bit. The next part of it, of how they're misused, is that it becomes too formulaic. We can use sales to make predictions about future sales. This is something that I like to do, is let's take a look at, okay, how has this card trended over the past year, and what does the next sale of this card look like? That is a great opportunity for me to find arbitrage a lot of times, is to try to see if there's something that's trending upwards, that maybe there's not a sale on this card, but the market of similar cards has trended upwards, and the person who is selling this particular card hasn't adjusted theirs yet. For example, there's a big run up in a lot of 90s stuff, and typically with, let's say, Michael Jordan, for example, there will be waves of Michael Jordan run ups where every few years people get really into Jordan stuff, especially the high end stuff, and you'll see prices kind of move up, and they might dip back down, but there's always what people call the new floor. So it bottoms out at kind of a new level that is typically higher than where the last floor was. So while it is a little bit of a curve going up and down, the bottom of the curve is still overall up from where it was when the trajectory, easy for me to say, changed on the card. A good example of a one that I have in my case right now is 93 Scoring Kings. And this was a card that I had stickered at 2,700, which was the highest of the recent 5 sales, because it's Jordan. I'm not going to sell it for below what these average of the sales are. It's a card that is one of his more popular rare cards out there, and it's not really all that rare. There's a bunch of them out there. Mine is a PSA 8, and now if you look at the recent sales of PSA 8s, my price is somewhat in the middle of where they've been going for. Maybe on the higher end of that middle range, but it's no longer at the top because there's a sale at 3,000. So all of a sudden now I'm not the highest sale, and it's just because I've seen a change in the Jordan market. I've seen more people interested in this card. So I had a feeling when I bought it that, hey, if I can get into it at a price that is, middle of the market now, that might be the lower end of the market in a little bit of time from now. And it turns out it only took a couple of weeks, which it's nice when that happens. It doesn't always happen that way. A lot of times it's a slow burn, but hey, sometimes things get hot a little faster than you might anticipate. But you can use those past sales to kind of see if there's going to be something that ticks up, but it's not a one-for-one formula. You'll see a lot of times people will try to use the card ladder value, and it's something that I find interesting as well. One key thing to note about card ladder is that there is a number on the home screen of card ladder when you subscribe to it that tells you the accuracy of the card ladder value. And typically it hovers around 80% accuracy, meaning that that number is not gospel, and the way that that number is calculated is based on a number of factors, and really it's based on what index it's tied to. And I don't think a lot of people realize that the index matters a lot in that. I would show you an example of that. If you have a Trey Lance card, I'll tell you right now that the card ladder value is going to be drastically different if that card is tied to the Trey Lance index versus being tied to the card ladder 50 index, because those are two different markets entirely. One of them will tell you that the card has probably gone down in value. One of them will tell you that it's probably up 30%. So it's important to know what index it's being tied to if you're using a tool like card ladder. I'm not 100% sure how something like market movers work and their price forecasting, but I would assume it's similar lines of an algorithm that is used based on other data points, but those data points don't always take into context what is going on behind some of these sales. It does not detect for shill bidding. It does not detect for poorly listed auctions. It does not detect for poorly timed auctions. It does not detect for damaged cards. It's an algorithm that is only as good as the data that is put into it. And that's not to knock any of these services. I think that they're great. I use Card Ladder every single day. But it's also only as good as the data that you put into it, as is really any tool in life, not just for card-related things. The last thing about it is that we are trying to use this data to eliminate subjectivity from something that is inherently subjective. the value of every single card is subjective in sports in particular. It might be a little bit different in a TCG where you actually do still have remnants of a book value through TCG player price or whatever other market mover tools there may be out there to measure what Pokemon cards are going for. But in a sports context, with all of the different parallels, with all of the different numbered cards, the short prints, etc., etc., there is always going to be some degree of subjectivity to it. I'll even tell you that it happens among common cards. I had an exercise where I had two friends sitting in a room with me, and I said, let's do something together. I want you to comp out what a PSA 10 Joe Burrow Prism rookie goes for. That should be a very easy card to determine what the value is, right? It's a card that sells incredibly often. But guess what? We came up with 3 different values for what the card is worth. And we kind of wanted to put it in a range of what it's worth. It wasn't even just pinpointed to one number. So we can't all agree on a card like that. How are we supposed to agree on something that only sells once every 6 months or once every 4 years? It's crazy. We can't. But there are people who want to make it that objective when it is just impossible. We can agree upon a value, but that doesn't mean that is truly the value of a card. And just because it has previously sold for something does not mean we are guaranteed to get that again. Good example of this, that Marvel triple auto that I bought in one of my videos earlier in the week. I have it listed right now for $69.99 or best offer on eBay, when the dual auto sold for just over, I think it was either $6,800 or $6,900. So in theory, my triple auto, oh, well, it should be a no-brainer. Well, it's been up for several weeks now, and I haven't got an offer, or I haven't had someone hit to buy it now at $69.99. I haven't had an offer for $6,000. I haven't even had an offer for $5,000. I haven't even had an offer for $4,000 on it yet. Best offer I've had, $3,500. That's about half of that sale with just the dual auto. Just because that one sold for that price doesn't mean that I'm guaranteed to get that price on mine. This happens a lot with one-of-ones. Excuse me, there I got a little tongue-tied saying that. This happens a lot with one-of-ones. You'll see where a one-of-one is previously sold, and someone will say, oh, there's a direct on it. Can you be below the direct? And sometimes no. I'll say I'm the one who bought it, because that is true. Sometimes I am the one who bought it. But people assume that if it's sold for this price one time, that's the value of it. No other context matters. That's just the value of it. We can use that as a guide for what the value could be. And a lot of times, yeah, that is the value of the card. It did sell for that. And the value is probably still pretty close to that number. But there's also times where listings are not very good. There's times where auctions end at very inopportune times. There's times where players' markets actually change, where the card's value may be different, and there just might be the right buyer who is willing to pay a lot for that one specific card. You just never know. Happens also with player collectors. There is a card that I have coming in this week. It's a Jose Ramirez one-of-one, and there's not really anything that's exactly like this card that has sold before. There are similar different Jose Ramirez one-of-ones that I can look at, but they're not quite the same. If you knew the card I was talking about, you would understand what I mean. But there are versions of this card for different players that I can look at. But just because those players sold for something doesn't necessarily mean that the Jose Ramirez is going to sell for a multiplier of that card. I can't take the Riley Green copy of that card and then say, well, Jose Ramirez's market is 2.4 times Riley Green's, and then multiply the sale of the Riley Green by 2.4, and this is the value of the Jose Ramirez. I can do that. Sure, I can absolutely do that to try to make a prediction about what the value is, but that does not mean that's what the value is, because there might not be a Jose Ramirez collector out there who wants this card as badly as that Riley Green collector wanted that one. There are some really hardcore player collectors out there for some very obscure players. They are willing to pay up to get cards of their favorite player, even if it is a astronomical sale by all other metrics, based on what other people might think, but they don't care. They want the card. They have to have that card. That's their player, and they're going to pay for it. And likewise, too, there might be two guys who really want this specific Jose Ramirez card who decide to go to battle for it, and that's going to drive the price up to a number that I could never imagine. That's the beauty of one-on-ones, is that you truly never know. And although I can make predictions until I'm blue in the face, the only way I'll know if my evaluation of this card was right or wrong is when I actually sell it and what I get out of it and how much that is compared to what I spent on it. It's really the only way to know, and I don't know how long that will take. It could be by the time that this video is uploaded, I get it in hand and I sell it within 30 minutes of having it. Or it could be a year from now and I'm still sitting on this card. You just truly never know. So here's what actually matters when it comes to comps and when they are, I think, the most useful. Again, my opinion. I've said that several times here, but this is just my opinion. Here's what really matters with cards is what is currently out there for a card. One of ones, what it sold for previously, probably doesn't matter all that much right now because if I have a one of one, I'm at no obligation to sell it for what it sold for previously. I don't have to. And if you want that card, you're going to have to pay what I'm asking for it because it's the only one out there. That's just how it works. There is a card that I'm trying to get from my Prism Blue Ice set. This one's numbered to 99. It's a Mitch Trubisky card. Numbered to 99. There's only two listed on eBay right now, and they are both over $100. I am not willing to pay over $100 for that card. I'm willing to pay maybe $20, and that would 10x the only sale of that card ever. But I need it for my set. That's what I'm willing to pay for it. The seller who has it, I've messaged him. He's not willing to go below 100. He's not. He has sent me one seller offer for 106. That's what he wants for it. So I'm at his mercy. I can either pay that price because that's the cheapest I can currently get the card or wait. And I have chosen to wait. And I've been waiting about 2 years now actively searching for this card to no avail. There have been no other ones that have popped up that I can try to make an offer on. That's it. That's the only game in town. There's one also on ComC, but the seller is even higher than the other one. So forget that. I'm not going to be able to get that one as well unless he changes his mind and lowers the price of the card. But there's also something called demand as well. Is that a card may be listed for something, but if there is a very strong demand for the card, then you might actually be able to get what is above market value, if you will. It's kind of what we see with Ohtani right now, is that Ohtani is incredibly hot in the sports card market. And that's why these prices are driven up, is because people are willing to pay over the last sale to get these cards, especially on the rare stuff that doesn't pop up too often, because you only get so many bites at the apple. You don't know when the next one is going to pop up. And if there are a lot of people competing against you who also want that card, be prepared to pay up. It's going to be a battle of who wants it more. And a card is ultimately only worth what someone is willing to pay. And there's naysayers out there for that phrase, but it's true. Every single card that sells and is paid for is sold to someone who is willing to pay that amount for that card, and the seller agrees to sell the card for that amount. Again, my one of one, Marvel Auto. Nobody at this time is willing to pay $7,000, $6,000, $5,000, or even $4,000 for that card. They have not come along yet. Maybe there are people out there willing to do it, they just haven't seen the card. Maybe, it's tax season, they're waiting for that tax refund to come in, and they're going to use that money to buy a big card for their collection, and my card's the one they're targeting. Maybe it's something that they have to just save up for. Maybe they are just waiting to see if I'm willing to come down in price a little bit. Who knows? But to this point, nobody has been willing to pay that price. So we can argue, oh, well, if the dual auto sold for $6,900, well, this triple auto, that's a $10,000 card. Yeah, logically, we might be able to make that argument, but nobody's willing to even pay 70% of that. So was it really that valuable? No, because nobody's willing to pay that price for that card. At least not yet. And that's where all this comes in, is that comps are great. They're a great way to be a tool to predict what a value of a card is. But unless you have someone who is willing to sell you that card at that price, the comps are meaningless. And if you can't find someone who's willing to sell you that card at that price, you have two options. Option one is that you pay their price. Or option two, you wait for one at a lower price to pop up. And a lot of times I find that in this day and age, because of the plethora of options that we have available, for example, if you're in the market for a Teteroa Macmillan RPA, you have your pick of the litter. Pretty much every single product out there for football has RPAs in it. You can get one that's on card. You can get one that has a patch that has the Panther logo on it. You'll have to pay more for that, of course, but there are so many different ones out there that you can choose from. You pick the one that is to your liking. Now, if you specifically want one from National Treasures, well, and you want the true RPA as well, the one numbered to 99, then you are limited to those 99. You'll have to find who has the cheapest one out there among the 99 that exist in the world. And there might not be that many. Ergo my Mitch Trubisky Blue Ice. There's 99 of them in the world. There's only 2 available for sale. And I'm not willing to pay what either of those guys are waiting for. But there's really a lot of times no loyalty to any given card because of the number of different options that we have out there. Yes, there are your blue blood cards. Yes, there are a lot of collectors out there. But there are also a lot of people just looking to flip and make a buck out there. And they don't care about the prestige of the card. They're in it to make a quick buck. So if you're not willing to sell a card that fits into their formula, they'll find something else that you have that does fit, or they'll find someone else who has something that fits into their formula. There's no loyalty to the cards among a large segment out there. But don't get me wrong, there's still collectors out there. There's a lot of them out there, and they usually aren't as loud in the community as some of those who are just looking to flip. But they're out there, and they are willing to pay the price for these cards. How else do you think that these comps show up? I've said it time and time again, the comp fairy does not come overnight and sprinkle in new data to card ladder so that your card is going up in value magically. These are real people paying for these cards a lot of times. Shill bidding and all the nefarious actions aside. So that, in my opinion, is how comps should be used. What is currently available? What is the demand for the card? And what is someone willing to pay? And all of those factors can be determined based on what a card is previously sold for. An asking price might be set based on what the card is previously sold for. The demand of the card may be at a certain price point that is in line with what the card is sold for. And there might be only people willing to pay what that card is previously sold for. There might not be that person who's willing to pay above that. It's all up to us. The data is a great tool, but the tool is only as good as the way that we use it. That'll wrap it up for me today. Again, if you disagree with what I've said today, just know it's just my opinion. It's not fact, but I would love to hear your thoughts. If you want to leave them in the comments section on YouTube, gladly will embrace a friendly debate with anyone, or if you agree with me, would love to hear that too. Make sure you follow along on all my socials, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok as well. I'm trying to be more active on all 3 of them. That's a challenge at times because I'm not the most social media savvy individual out there. But that'll wrap it up for me next week, or this week I should say. Next week I'll have some more content for you, a new podcast episode as well as a few new vlogs. Until then though, be sure to take care, stay safe, and be kind.